I get to talk a little bit about chess and the impact that probably a lot of you are having on chess. So let me start by telling you what it was like to play chess 40 years ago. I learned how to play from my mother when I was 6 years old. Again, stroke of luck. In those days, 90%, 95% of chess careers went like this. Sunday, you heard that there was a game called chess. Till Wednesday, you looked for someone who knew the rules of chess. Thursday, your career was over. You gave up. But 5% of people, their mother, their father, or some friend knew the rules of the game. And they would say, oh, I can teach you. They show you quickly. And, maybe 1% goes to a library and thing. But anyway, you get the point. Then I was lucky that opposite my sister's college, there was a chess club. And she happened to see it a couple of times. So a few months later, they said, well, why don't we put him in a chess club? And that's pretty much how my chess career started. So I was literally somewhere between 6 and 7. I would go to this chess club. Everyone there was much older. I mean, to me, they could have seemed 70, but I think they were all 30s. And I would play against them. Soon played my first chess tournament, and so on. And they had a very interesting system. By the way, this was in the old Soviet Cultural Center, and they donated very generously some nice chess sets and chess clocks, so we could play whenever we want. So we would soon have the system where 10 of us would get together, and 2 people would play a game, 5-minute games, so they'd always finish within 10 minutes. The winner could continue. The loser got up and got back in the queue. And if you do the math, it's more than an hour before you get the next chance to play. And during that hour, typically the other 8 people gang up on the person who's winning too often. So they'd form what is called a committee, which is they would all give advice, basically interfere in the game. And so it would go. But I used to go for this because it was very addictive. I got to play so many games of chess. I would go every Monday evening, and these are the club's timings. Every Monday evening, every Thursday evening, and then the whole of Sunday. Sunday it was open the whole day. I'd just go and keep playing all the time. There wasn't much else you could do. So in those days, we didn't have a lot of chess books. We had some. They were slowly starting to come. We didn't have the latest games because literally it went in concentric circles. The publishing house, that country would get it next day. Every other country would get it a couple of days later. For India, it was about 2 to 3 months before somebody managed to go and maybe buy a copy and so on. So we didn't find out about the late games. The only thing, latest games, what we had to do was to just play each other very often. And then we'd play competitions, things like that. And actually what I discovered later is this is not a bad way to learn. It's not necessarily the Soviet way. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, the Soviet Union was the dominant country in chess. The Soviets could field a team that could beat the rest of the world combined. And that was the kind of gap they had. If you ask me why, I can't really say. A little bit is cultural, but a lot of it is simply the fact that the state gave a lot of the best chess players jobs. So they were the first professionals, in a sense. They could live from the game. And they had very sophisticated training methods. They would look over past games. They would form groups, analyze it, break it down, come up with new concepts. Very, very advanced training methods, but these were non-existent anywhere else. I never even had a coach. Till I was 20, I never worked with someone else because it wasn't possible. I would collaborate. I would take me and my nearest rival, if we were friends, we would discuss some problems together, exchange ideas, things like that. But this concept of coach and all came much later. And So all I did was to play lots and lots of 10-minute games. At a time when the dominant chess format was 5 hours. 5 hours plus it could be adjourned to another day, or 6 hours, no, 1 or 2 formats and thing. And that was it. There were no other formats. So in fact, it was like, I mean, you can't avoid the cricket analogy, right? It's like preparing for test thing by constantly playing, I don't know, 20-minute matches. But it turned out to be very natural because I developed a kind of feeling for chess. If you don't know what plan you're following, you have not studied it methodically, you have not seen too much of what other people are doing, then essentially what you're developing is not some chess logic. You're developing intuition. You feel the piece should go here, you feel that should go there, this belongs here, that belongs there. It's a very... Now I'm bringing this up, this is actually very similar to how many years later computers would play chess. Or even how computers have influenced the game. Then we slowly started to use chess books a lot. And now once you had a chess book, invariably you start building up your library. And one of the most important skills was not only knowing what you had read, but remembering where it was so that you could look it up later. So there was a certain skill. You could see some chess players were just effortless at it. They would walk into a library and they'd immediately say, this game, I remember it's in this edition. They'd go to some part of the thing, pull it up. Literally a librarian's brain as well. Indexing. And then the first chess database appeared in '87. I was already a Grandmaster and I had become World Junior Champion as well. So it came quite late in that sense. And what this did was, it started to publish all these magazines. I mentioned that it took a long time for the stuff to come. These magazines started to be stored on things, and we would get floppy disks. I'm sure most of you don't know what that is. We'd get these floppy disks, and actually we suffered from the same problem as the books, that they would also take some time to come by post. So it didn't solve the problem, but suddenly our suitcase got a lot lighter. And then we had to pull up the software and then know how to look for something. And I would say, being very young, which means I had no skills which I needed to forget, no resistance to this, I was very enthusiastic with this new technology. I quickly learned how to search for people's games, what they played with white, what they played with black, with what result I was looking for, what position I was looking for. And I mean, the software also would improve with each edition, but you get the idea. And I found that suddenly I was getting closer in strength to a lot of the people who are very good at their library skills. So here we see just computers, the first wave, they displaced one skill that people had. Then a couple of years later, about 3 years later, the first chess playing program appeared. Chess playing program for the PC. There was another one which on these mainframes or whatever. But the first chess playing program for the PC. It's hard to tell you how ridiculously weak it was. I could sometimes play 40 games against it and win all 40 and not even really be putting any effort. They were really weak. But even then, we saw that these very primitive chess playing programs would spot human errors. So the thing about humans is that we make mistakes. And it's simply the way our brain is wired. It gets bored easily, and then it doesn't like constant repetition. So eventually, if you have to do the same thing over and over again, soon enough an error will crop up. But if you have these things, and what they're doing is totally different. What these programs are doing are literally taking every legal move and examining it. And in those days, they had not even come to pruning and things like that. So they would literally examine every legal move, which is why they were so ridiculous, because they were considering 45, 50 moves, whereas instantly with my eye, I would look at 3. I would not even realize that another 30 were possible. You'd have to really tell me, is it a legal move? And then he's, okay, well, yes, you can write that. It's literally like knowing that your name starts with an A and then you don't see 25 other letters. That's the... So that one came, and then it got better, and then it got better, and then it got better. And each stage, your skill set is slowly evolving. First, it's literally the most basic problems, like using a calculator. Then it's using a slightly better calculator. Then maybe like using functions and things like that. You're slowly pushing some things onto it and doing the harder work yourself. In 1995, I played a match for the world title with Kasparov. And for one of the games, he had been preparing with this... Again, now it seems like a joke, the speed of this thing. But he left a computer running for 1 week with one move he had. And there was someone going every once in a while and entering a move in this computer and seeing how it reacted. They would wait 3 hours for its reaction, and so on. But after 1 week, he managed to get the idea to a point where he thought, we can maybe try this. And this turned out to be this is the game that he equalized the match with. In game 10. I think in 2002 or 3, so about 6-7 years later, I tried this on my PC and the answer came within like 2 minutes. So already what used to take hours had dropped by that much. And already computers, first they were beating us in the slowest games, in the fastest games, and then because they don't make mistakes, so for them speed is not a problem, but for us we need time to process and so on. So, but as they got better, then it simply started beating us everywhere, and then started beating us in every single game. By 2003-04, people just got bored playing chess against computers. So I'm referring to computers as non-AI, and we will then say AI, hopefully that distinction is obvious. And it made no sense, but now these things were good enough that you could do 2 important things. One is you could leave a problem running when you went for dinner, for instance. You just let the engine running, you go have dinner, you come back in an hour, it's gotten to a very high search depth, and it gives you a conclusion, and you can pretty much believe that conclusion. With historical perspective, I can say that everything is relative. Once upon a time, I trusted that evaluation enough to believe in it for a very crucial game. Now a modern engine laughs at that old engine's assessment and says it's completely wrong. So which is it? That's the funny thing about technology. It's constantly rewriting everything. But in 2006, there was somebody decided that instead of having these brute force things, just look at everything, he wrote something which allowed it to prune the possible moves very strongly. So right away, this program version was called Ripka, and what it would do is within the first 30 seconds, it would prune 90% of the moves away and say they're nonsense. So it literally only needed to see that the slightest thing was wrong with them, it would chuck them. And then it would focus all its power on the remaining 3 or 4 moves, and automatically just suddenly seemed new again. After a long time of seeing more or less the same kind of answers, if you were wrong, you know you were going to be wrong. If you were right, you knew how you were going to be right. But suddenly, unexpected things started to happen. It started to play almost in a human way, but could back up its conclusion, so to speak. So then that kept chess going for a while because, it seemed like everyone had reached a balance in some arms race, and suddenly this new toy comes along and everyone's able to continue going. And that lasted for another 4 or 5 years. I mean, I can nitpick, but now I can say that the next big thing which happened was in 2016, we started to have neural nets play chess, essentially AI. And the way they set it up was quite ingenious. They set two neural nets against each other, or in fact against themselves. And what it did was, it knew the rules of chess and nothing more. So on day one, it had just learned the rules of chess, the first game. It played one game against itself with the rules of chess. Then it played a second, then it played a third, and so on. And eventually figured out a few things. Well, this one doesn't seem to be working, this one seems to be working. So it learned from that. Then the fifth game got a bit better, and so on. Eventually, so I'm told, in 4 days, it played 44 million games. And then it started to beat everything they threw at it. Every computer they could make it play against, it just started thrashing. And then they realized, some breakthrough moment had happened here. So the second important thing is, because it had not, until then, every computer that had to be programmed, they had to program it because it couldn't teach itself. So they had to put in some rules. They would have to say, well, a pawn is, well, what we learn in chess is a pawn is a pawn. A bishop or knight are roughly equivalent to 3 pawns. A rook is equivalent to 5, and a queen is equivalent to 9. So at least you'd put that in. Then you would tell it that, look, the king's safety is very important. And for chess player, it's obvious to say king's safety is important, but for a programmer, it's very hard to define something like king's safety. So, it took a lot of trial and effort to slowly put some factors in. And so there was always this human interference. With these new things, you eliminated this so-called human knowledge and let the moves speak for themselves, so to speak. So now suddenly the strongest chess playing thing on the planet almost owed nothing to human knowledge. And sure enough, it started finding some very interesting things. We were always taught to develop your central pawns. Always, bring your pieces to the center. It's one of the fundamental rules of chess. Now, it's not that that was overturned, but these new machines invariably tried to push the pawns on the side as well. And so that was quite shocking. So we had to try and figure out why. Why is this pawn thing? The second thing, it found that if you push a pawn all the way to the 6th, it can cause, statistically, the chances for the side with the pawn that far up increase. So new things were popping up, which was very, very interesting for us. And so some chess players started to try and copy it. Some tried to learn from it, tried to understand what was going on. Some of the hasty ones tried to implement it without understanding what was going on. Of course, for them, it's just a pawn that's there. It's not, they don't know why it's there, but they kind of put it there and hope that something would turn up. But anyway, by now, I think we understand, or at least we have a good sense of why that is. That pawn is up there because it's blocking the other king, the black king, from escaping. And it's close to the queening square. So unexpected things can happen, and then you know at least what you're going to look for. And this, in a sense, was this final stage. But in between, there are some trends which are difficult to pigeonhole into saying it came with AI or it came with brute force. It was constantly popping back and forth. We had discovered it in early forms, and then we found that more and more sophisticated versions are coming later. So, to come back on how all this affected me as a chess player, I mean, I started to learn chess. I started to learn how to play chess. I started to learn how to think. I started to learn how to reason. I started to learn how to think. And so, how all this affected me as a chess player. In 95, I was in the receiving end of something that technology brought about. Again, my phone nowadays will find the answer in 2 or 3 seconds, what took Kasparov's computer 1 week then. But that was the early version. Then a couple of years later, I figured out how to use, I mean, not figured out, but got good at using chess engines to clean my lines and so on. And as long as I had enough space to play, because I'm an intuitive player, so as long as computers were able to drop me in a position where I didn't mind being, then I could take over. And this seemed like and whenever I got that balance correct, then I played very well. My results worked very well. So then I was getting the best of both worlds. I had the space to play, which is really what differentiates me from my opponent, right? But the computer, I'm able to go to the board knowing that I've not blundered anything so far. So it's a kind of guarantee. It gives you some early ideas, knowing what you're looking for, what you're avoiding, and things like that. But there were often periods when I'd get completely stuck, where in fact it seems that computers were slowing me down. This happened in 2002 when I lost the first world title that I had. I lost it in 2002, and it suddenly felt that computers were slowing me down. That if you keep on working with it, you tend to trust it more and more. And it's a hard balance to keep. You have to keep your skepticism, you have to keep your thing, and you have to keep asking questions, because otherwise you don't understand anything. But how many times will anyone question what a calculator is producing? I mean, are you going to do every sum yourself again? So this thing for efficiency also means that you tend to kind of believe an answer, you don't ask enough questions. And that works badly against you. Now, to come back to modern times, this is even more essential, because even the AI doesn't understand what the hell it's saying. It just produces some percentage. But it can't give you much of an explanation. You'll literally have to ask it every move, go up and down the line. So if there's a move, okay, this move, it'll go 5, 6 moves down the line, then you think you understand why it doesn't work. Then you come back, you start again. You go down a second line, you go down 5 or 6 moves, you think you know why it doesn't work. It doesn't work for a different reason. But wait a minute, then when you come back, you suddenly think, wait a minute, why are the reasons not the same? Because it is the same kind of idea. And then you realize that in fact, there's an even smaller difference somewhere else. Then you look. And in fact, the answers don't come easy. It looks funny that you have something which gives you the best answer instantly, but it seems that we understand less and less all the time. So sometimes you'll go to sleep still not completely sure what happened. Then maybe 1 or 2 days later, suddenly in your head, and the sleep is a good part of it, because somewhere your brain is still trying to figure it out. Suddenly you'll think, wait, this thing that worked in line 4, I think that's the reason it also doesn't work in line 1 or something. And you have to do this over and over constantly before you understand. But notice what has happened here. I'm not even trying to come up with any idea. I'm essentially saying, okay, you give me an idea, then I will use you as a horse to go up and down these lines to navigate all this stuff and a thing. So in a sense, my job has come from, in my junior days, I used to come up with the idea, I used to check the lines myself, and I would implement them myself. Now, I don't do anything. All I need to do is to keep there asking questions. And so, over a long enough time period, you suddenly look back and you realize you're a completely different person. And now when I look at my older games, I wonder, how did I get through this without having any confirmation that this is true or that is thing? I mean, how did I take all these decisions? It's quite scary also. But this is a thing that happened repeatedly in my career. I would have periods of just fantastic success when it seemed that my training was aligned to the strength of the tools I was using. And then I would have periods when I was stuck completely. To give you one example of both, in 2008, I had to play one of the biggest matches in my life for the World Championship against Kramnik. And I decided that playing my favorite line against him made no sense. If I did that, I looked at every game I'd played with him in the past, and one statistic came out. He had beaten me 9 times with the white pieces. He had never beaten me with black. I had beaten him 3 times with the white pieces and 4 times with the black pieces. So 7. And so he was leading slightly, but he was only beating me with one color at that point. Whereas I was beating him, in fact, more often with the color where you're slightly weaker, because So that pointed already to something interesting, but it pointed to a bigger problem, which is that with the white pieces, I was not making any impact on him. He was just very good at blocking, and I was getting no headway. Against other people, my score was incredibly high, but against him, I just couldn't. So I decided to change my white opening move. And one of the reasons I could do this was because, first of all, I had a few months, but 15 years ago, it would not have been enough. You would need 4 or 5 years before you could switch to a new opening, because it takes time to familiarize yourself. A little bit like speaking a language. Just because you memorized 40 words in a vocabulary doesn't mean you will speak it instantly, right? The language you're most familiar with, for me, King's Pawn opening was like my mother tongue. And that's where I feel completely at home and can react, can improvise everything. Here, that didn't exist. But I still felt I could do it because computers. I knew that I could more or less find a new idea in every line. So even though his knowledge and intuition in this area is better, I could look for very unexpected lines everywhere and try to confine the discussion there, minimizing the advantage. Second thing, even though I wouldn't have built up the advantage, because I knew that I would have checked it to the computer that at least the position I was being dropped in was not bad for me. And then I could take it from there. And this worked brilliantly. It worked well because the surprise value was very new, but it also worked well for very human reasons. I was in unfamiliar territory, like speaking a second language. And so you're more concentrated when you're talking to someone. You're thinking, am I making a mistake? Am I using the wrong thing? You're more alert during the game. So focusing on the game was less of a problem. Maybe it's a confession, but quite often in chess, we don't concentrate all the time. Sometimes we are on autopilot. If something looks pretty familiar, we suspect it probably is going to go thing. So we make automatic moves and all. Here I was being much more focused in the game. And my sense of danger also had come back. I was much more alert. Because again, I kept on thinking, this doesn't look familiar, so I was trying harder. And I liked this sense of risk. I enjoyed it. It helped me become very creative. So that was, I think, one of the reasons I benefited a lot there. However, 2 years later, I suddenly hit a wall and I had like a year of very average results. And the reason is a lot of the younger players who had, I think we're already talking about players who had never lived in a world where computers had been stronger than human beings. They were born, of course, at that time, but by the time they learned chess, computers were stronger, and they only knew that world. So they were sitting around and playing games on the internet all night long, and they would come up with these moves that didn't work before, or had thought not to be working before. They would experiment, they would try something. They would use the computer to do just very basic stuff, but enough to get them to play. And they'd force you to solve all these very new and original problems. And I could not adapt to that very easily, because somewhere even your own career is a kind of barrier. You play lines in which you've invested a lot of time, and so you want them to work. You don't want to give that advantage up easily. So you keep on trying to make these old lines work, but they're pushing you in completely new directions right away. So that was one turn I didn't react very well in, as I mentioned, my results suffered. I bring this up because there is no straight line. It's not like you're good with technology or bad with technology, or good at learning or bad at learning. You will be both continuously. At least that was my strong experience, that some changes you'll master very easily, some trends you'll catch on very well, others are much harder to adapt to. The second thing you could do with computers that I did often in those days was, if there was a difficult position that I didn't fully understand, I would take two programs and leave them playing games the whole night. You could set up these engine matches. I think some of you know this term Monte Carlo thing, so we would basically have those runs. We would get it to play, depending on the quality you want, either it could play 20 games over the night or play 200. And the next morning you come and you try to see if anything interesting popped up. Now, the old kind of computer, which was what I was using back then, would play the same dumb way. I mean, dumb not in a bad move sense, but simply the thing you wanted to do is the one thing it never does. And it would always do what it would do again and again. So it was only a limited picture. So you would have to feed in the positions you wanted tested ever more strongly. If you wanted something played, you couldn't assume it would play it. You would have to force it into the list of positions that it had to try, and then it would do it. So a lot of intervention. But nonetheless, we got to a reasonable level with this. And in the morning when I woke up, even if nothing else I took away, I could take away the fact that white has won 57% of the games in this position, or something like that. So now, specifically with AI, I think the beauty is that the learning is going to be so much easier, but at the same time, we're not going to get any advantage of it because it's going to be so much easier for everyone. So it's essentially, again, it becomes an arms race. But if you don't use it, then yes, it's quite shocking how far the difference will be. I once played a match with Karpov in 99. It was a tournament where very early thing, and they were still probing this idea of what they called advanced chess. That is, I could use a computer during the game. So I could use a computer to analyze while I'm playing, and my opponent could do the same. So Karpov was doing the same. And they gave him the software 6 months early, and they told him, you can practice with it and so on. And he kept on saying, yes, I'll practice with it and practice with it and so on. But when we started playing, everyone realized that he had never bothered practicing it. And I mean, I'm not bringing this up to make fun of him. Similar things have happened to everyone. It's just that he grew up, he is 1950. So he grew up, his entire career was pre-computer. And so for him, it was almost humiliation to ask this thing for advice. And this was his psychological makeup. Anyway, so one person, and what we were doing on our screens was visible to the audience, just not to each other. So one person saw me, I took the position that we had on the board. I took a database of 12 million games and I made it into a database of 40,000 games. and made that the database to search from, so that all the searches got literally 50 times faster. And then I would leave 3 engines on 3 different positions and and I was just sitting there waiting for the results to pump, like a pilot in a console, in a cockpit. But one of the spectators said Karpov is using it like a high-tech notebook. I mean, he's just entering his moves and doing nothing. And then I won 5 out of 6 games. So the problem is if you refuse to use technology, then the gap becomes suddenly very big. But what do I think specifically that AI can bring to chess? So we've seen how chess learning has adapted, how the role of a chess player itself has shifted a lot. How you work, everything. Before it was understanding how the game was played yourself, trying to figure it out, drawing your conclusions. Now, whatever conclusions I have, I know it's probably available to everyone else. They have drawn exactly the same conclusions. What is it I am bringing to the chessboard? Yes, on the chessboard, there is no external assistance. So we are all in the same boat. But what is it I'm taking to the table? Why am I going to win a game? And you have to ask yourself that question. Because if you don't, you'll just, I'll repeat the computer's lines, he will repeat the computer's lines, and it'll be whatever the verdict it is. What is it I'm bringing to the table? So the first thing is extra familiarity, more questions. If I examine not only the best line, but the next 7 or 8 moves, and then if at the right moment I play the 7th best move, and if my opponent has neglected that, then I have an advantage. I have some chance of showing that I'm a better player, which is finally the aim of a chess game. But even that, everybody will go down a list faster, sooner or later. Then you come up with entirely new systems. You play even the bad moves. You question every game in the past. And we have hit a stage where if time travel were possible, I could go back and realize that almost everything I once believed to be just the truth in chess is wrong now. Instead of being something that's true all the time, it's now true maybe 52% of the time. And that's why it seemed to us like a pretty good guess. And that brings us to another problem, which is also the problem that Karpov faced. You have to be willing to forget the things that you knew. You also have to be willing to forget things that you knew and that have worked very well for you and that you have some sort of emotional attachment to. You think, I'm good in this opening, I'm good at this I can do, come on, but you may not be as good as you think you are. You have to be willing to sit there for many hours with software, play training games, let it play with itself, testing individual positions, going over the lines over and over again. And if that means you come out with a new understanding, yes. Invariably, I find that nothing is lost. If you have, let's say, error-checked everything to the latest standards, you'll sometimes find that your old stuff survives in bits, and you can still use that. But without this constant learning, it drops off very fast. There's a lot of scope for doing things much faster now. Now, before, if I was going to play against a certain player, I'd pull up a database of their games, look at all their moves, every move they had played, and look at the statistics. He won so many games in this position that came after move 16, but against this, he's doing much worse. Why? And you'd use these old signals to read it. Now I can even skip that. There are bots of almost every chess player, and the bots are trained on their games. You remember what I mentioned earlier, that these computers learned without any human knowledge? Well, there were people who tried interesting experiments. They said, well, can we take a neural net and instead of its own games with itself, let's take all the human games that we ever played and feed it to it without any values. We don't tell it the queen and the rook is worth so much in this square and that square. We just feed it all these human games. Let's see what comes up. And that program played also very interesting chess because it was learning, but it was only learning what it wanted to learn. But the material it had, the training data it had, was human games. It played in a certain way. Now you take that principle, you apply it like this. I'll take the 8,000 moves that, I don't know, Nakamura has played. I'll make a bot out of it. And then I'll play training games against things. So, and next thing you find, you go to the board and the human plays pretty much the way you expected, you suspected he's playing. The sad thing is to realize that we are just, that all of us are, I mean, I used to think we're so unique, right? But it turns out we can be mapped very easily. And we are much more predictable. Now, again, if you talk about AI and chess, you have to speak about two things. One is, let's say what ChatGPT and all are doing, which is essentially statistics applied to language. And the second thing is whether chess AI is possible. But because language is a fundamental way of how we learn, I think that's the key connection. Now, when I've dabbled in this sometimes. A couple of times when I tried to find something which is not working in my PC, I would look up the solution, and then it would say, you can create a batch file, you can do this, you can do that. Not very easy for me. But then I realized that I could ask ChatGPT or something to write me this program. And then I take that program, put it in the startup settings, and boom, kind of the problem solved. These little things. The big advantage is that we can just talk to this in the way we are accustomed. Before, we had to specify the rules. I mean, it gives us a correct answer, but you have to specify the questions and the rules and the terms of engagement, and it's very, very hard unless you're trained in that thing. And this was the big gap between chess players and non-chess and programmers. The programmers know exactly how to state what you're saying, but the chess player doesn't know how to explain it to the programmer. The programmer doesn't know how to ask the chess player what it is he's trying to communicate, which is one of the big problems when these two teams are trying to work together. This sort of thing might bridge that gap. So all of us will benefit from being able to ask it to research things in interesting ways. I'm sure all of you also have dabbled in it, and it is useful, probably will be more useful every day. But it's when they can integrate that it becomes interesting. If I were to tell my chess playing engine that if I could somehow talk to it in a language and say, these positions with 2 knights against a bishop and rook, my stats are not so good in it. Can you pull up some random examples here and there so I can see different things, something like that. Now that kind of question is very hard to frame, but if it could be done in this way, imagine then I would get the study material right away. And I could even ask it, look, give it to me in the form of puzzles or ask me questions here. And then I make it training exercises. It tells me, okay, you have 5 minutes. The question is, what will you play here? And then I sit there and think. I solve the problem. And I come back. And then within 3-4 days, I find that I'm actually more confident. I can make a little bit more sense out of it. So that integration is very good. We still don't have that yet. Computers can play very, very well. They're playing in a much more human style, which is they're doing a lot of long-term strategic thinking, and a lot of the tactical details are missing, but these guesses turn out to be correct because they are outperforming other older computers. And but how do you have a conversation with one of these things? So again, bridging this world of language and learning will be key to that, and it should be interesting to see how that becomes possible. Already, the number of people who have decided that they can become chess coaches has gone up by, I don't know, 100. People because it's so easy. Now you can give a lesson, you just have an online call, and you pull up some training material, you analyze it with an engine, and you talk about it. So even in coaching, it turns out there will be good coaches who generate original study material of their own with very, very effective use of the tools. And there'll be the regular stuff where you just generate a lesson very fast. You generate in 5 minutes, it'll be worth that. But, and I don't mean to joke at it. That's useful at a certain level of chess. For someone who's beginning, that might be enough. And the person who's just learned the rules doesn't have the expertise to even ask that. So somebody who pulls these very basic lessons can work at that level, and so on. And what's happening is that chess is becoming independent of geography. It no longer matters how isolated a chess community you're born in. You connect to everyone else, and you can catch up, maybe not 100%, but at least 70% of the way, and that's close enough. That's why you now see that almost no country dominates world chess. And so even the coaches have to, go back and play tournament games themselves. They have to compete at least once a month, because otherwise they've forgotten what it is the players are looking for. And so everyone has to dabble in multiple areas. You have to dabble in commentating sometimes. Turns out a lot of the things we know, or we think we know, we don't know how to explain. We don't really know how moves come. Turns out a lot of the moves simply pop up in my head, and I cannot say why. The process is unknown. So if I have to explain to someone, I can't. And when I do try to explain, the person says, but what you said doesn't make any sense. I can't find the move by the method you described. How are you going to... So this gap will continuously close. But AI made one more significant difference. A lot of the openings we thought were kind of hitting a wall. They showed that there was life left. And in a very funny way, people noticed that in positions which should just be flat equal, because nobody had made progress for years, AI things are showing, and neural net engines are showing 51% probability of success. Then people start asking why, and then it would come up with a few moves. You go down the line a little bit and you think, maybe it's not that easy to solve. There's still a little bit of life here. So all these things are important. For us, what has fundamentally changed is not the chessboard. When we compete, we are competing exactly like the way a chess player competed 200 years ago. No external assistance, an arbiter, a clock, and a chess set, and that's it. But at the same time, everything has changed. The training in chess has gone ahead 4 or 5 centuries. The playing is stuck in the same area, and it's almost like you're going back and forth. You go to this world, you have so many answers, so much information, and you go here to find out what it is you really understood. Then you go back again and you ask those questions again. Then you go back again to find what you really understood. Another joy of this is that now anti-cheating measures are compulsory in all chess tournaments. So I can't take a pen, I can't take a watch. They will scan me with a metal detector. They do this for all players, by the way. And then when you sit, if you get up, you want to go to the toilet, you have to tell the arbiter, going there. The toilet has all sorts of metal detection things. There are some weird consequences. But what can you do? It only takes one person cheating to disturb our sense of justice. If one person gets away, then suddenly things, how many people are getting away becomes the next obvious question. So chess world is involved in a huge fight against cheating, or the potential for cheating. I was almost relieved to see that they think in a few years deepfakes will be undetectable. I thought, okay, we suffered enough. You guys face this, and but the thing is, at the end, it'll change everything. But it would be a mistake to turn away. Just like very early in the days of the internet, when people did not think enough of what kind of bargain they wanted. And so by the default bargain was, it'll be free and we'll sell your data. And that became the default for everything. And now it's very hard. Even if you wanted to change, within a few years it became obvious, even if you wanted to change, there was no way to get any change to happen. Either it's meaningless change, where they show you a form saying we are collecting this data for this reason, you just push it away, or you accept it. With AI, I think, I mean, I'm not even talking of generative AI, just AI run by people, and like the rest of human history has shown, a certain percentage will be bad. We'll have to set the terms very early. And so if we always just take the default option and don't push, we're going to end up in a situation where, yeah, then it'll be too late to change, because there becomes an economic logic in simply, what was developed is cheaper to refine, and so that's the only thing that will happen. You'll not be able to make any fundamental changes. And therefore, it is important, I think, to get in early. It's also important to get in early because knowing the deeper your understanding of AI, the better you'll be able to leverage it. In chess, it mattered. If you knew how early engines worked, it gave you some insight into how later ones would work, and you're able to compare back and forth. In the same way, with AI, it's a technology that will potentially eliminate a lot of drudge work, will make learning much, much easier, learning about hundreds. And just like in chess, the openings, it once took you 5 years to learn, now you can learn in a month, as long as you know how to train yourself. Same thing, I mean, if we come to a world where our jobs become redundant very fast, we'll be picking up new skills within a month or two if we know how to use this very well. But it's equally important for us to get in early and think carefully about what are the bargains we're making. And that's our only chance to get, let's say, only or mostly the benefits. Thank you.